extent do you believe that a potential mismatch between the skills that people have and the skills that employers are looking for is responsible for the high unemployment rate that we have in the country at the moment?
I don't think it's the mismatch. I think it's to do with confidence. I'm a banker lending money to small businesses, and I know so many businesses that say to me, I could do with taking on extra staff. I'm really under pressure at the moment, but I'm scared of doing it. I'm frightened because if the current increase in sales doesn't carry on, I'll then have somebody that I can't get rid of. It's going to cost me money. I'm worried about increasing my overheads. I understand from press that I've read only today that the economy does appear to be on the turn. It does appear to be lifting. We've just got to believe that. If employers believe that, if big companies believe that, if they just thought, yes, actually, things are going okay, that would make a huge difference to employment.
I mean, obviously you paid quite a deal of attention to this. Do you know what the unemployment rate is in this constituency?
No, I don't. I know that youth unemployment's a significant problem here, and it's one of the issues. I have worked in the constituency dealing with long-term unemployed people, and I know that long-term unemployment is a particular problem in Corby. I was dealing with people who've been out of work for 2 and 3 years, and that is very difficult. When you're talking to somebody who's got out of the habit of working and who doesn't actually believe that anyone's going to give them a job, that's a real uphill struggle to try and do something about that. And I did that for the previous 6 years, working with those people, and that's a particular problem here. I understand as well that the youth unemployment figures here are higher than other areas, other parts of Northamptonshire. Now, there's a variety of reasons for that, but it really does need to be dealt with, because if somebody can't get a job when they leave school, after a year or two, the chances of them getting a job diminish and diminish. As the economy picks up, employers are going to tend to favour people who've relatively recently left school or relatively recently graduated. So those people that have been out of work for a couple of years will be way behind in the queue, and they may never leave it.
So what's your view on the government's policies on welfare reform?
It's an interesting one because I can see both sides of it, genuinely. I've worked in the job centre, I've sat there and listened to people who could get work and who just won't. They've just got in the habit of not working, they're prepared to settle for living on £50 a week, they're making no real effort to get a job, and you and I and the taxpayers and the pensioners out there are paying for those people to sit there and do nothing. And that's not right. That has to be dealt with. Equally, I've got some very good friends who are on disability benefit, who are in the process of being reassessed, and who've been put through the most terrible torture in terms of having their disability assessed, having their mobility vehicle taken away, when it's very, very clear to anyone that they need it and they deserve it, but they're having to fight desperately hard to hang on to the rights they've got at the moment. So, between those extremes, there's the right answer, and it's extremely difficult. The welfare bill is huge, it's got to be managed, but equally there's some unfairness going on at the moment, and that's got to be dealt with.
Speaking of things like welfare, there's obviously in the future one of the big things that we have to worry about is the nation's pensions liabilities. Do you think that there's anything that can be done now to address that, or is that something that we should focus on later?
One of the problems with the pensions issue is that it's been ducked and ducked and ducked for decades. Everybody's thought about it and known it was there. It's like this great black hole, isn't it? It was there all along, but everyone was looking at it and saying, oh, we'll worry about that tomorrow, we'll think about that tomorrow. And all of a sudden, it's like when you jump out of a plane and all of the ground suddenly coming up and hitting you. It's come very abruptly. I think it's extremely hard for pensioners. Anyone that's living purely on the old age pension, that's difficult. That's very, very difficult for them. And these are in some cases the war generation who never had a great deal in life, never had much of an opportunity to save for their old age, and now they're given a pension that they can barely live on. And we're a civilised nation. That's not right. But Equally with occupational pensions, take the doctors for example, because it is an interesting example, and my daughter's a medical student, so I've got some personal interest in this. The doctors are threatening to not exactly go on strike, but take some sort of action about the fact that their pensions are being lowered in some way by the government because they can't be afforded any longer. Now, doctors are well paid, they'll get very good pensions, and if we don't curb their pensions, then some of the poorest people in society will suffer. So it has to be done. Everyone has to tighten their belt, everyone has to sacrifice a little in this current economic climate. And nobody wants to. Everybody wants someone else to pay, everybody wants someone else to carry the burden. But the time has come for all of us to cut back a little for the greater good.
So I think we're beginning to get towards the end of the interview now, but there's just a couple more questions I'd like to ask you if I may. The first is a question about local issues. That there's been some discussion about wind farms in this constituency. There's been some opposition to them. What's your stance on that?
I've worked with some farmers who've installed wind farms because being a farmer is very hard at the moment. There's not much of an income from the traditional art of farming, and having a wind farm on your farm is one of the ways that you can actually make a little bit of an income at a time when the milk prices are so low, the cereal prices drop when there's a good harvest. So it's not easy for farmers. I know if you say poor farmer, people laugh at that and say, yeah, right. But I know a lot of farmers that are asset rich and cash poor. They've got this spread, they've got this lovely house, they've got all this land, and they're living on £3,000 a year, and it's tough for them. So I can understand why a farmer would want to have a wind farm on his land. The income from it is quite reasonable. I know that some people regard them as dreadful to look at. When I drive past the one at Burton, I always think it's quite elegant, but that's just a personal view. I don't dislike the look of them, but I know that people hate them. They think they're unsightly, they think they're a desecration of the countryside. I know that you have problems with flicker, with noise. There is a noise from them, that high-pitched whining. So I can fully understand why people object. And in every case, if there's a good local process where people have a chance to be listened to and to give their opinion, then I think the decision can be made soundly. In the end, the most logical place for them is offshore, and there doesn't actually seem to be anyone that objects to them offshore, not as far as I'm aware. So I hope that, I want us to have alternative energy sources, we absolutely have to. I hope that we can have some really big ones offshore where they won't offend people so much.
And one final question. If you were elected to represent Corby and came out of a ballot to be able to submit a private member's bill, what would that address?
I think the thing that offends me the most, the thing that I'm most worried about, is unemployment. Not just youth unemployment, but unemployment in general. When somebody can't get work, it devalues them. They feel worthless, they feel that they can never move on in their life. And in those circumstances, I just wish that there was more that could be done. Now, I don't know if you came across the programme with the fairy job mother in it, but she was an individual with a lot of experience who was going out and working with long-term unemployed people and turning their lives around, finding them jobs, giving them the skills to enable them to get jobs, getting them a job and moving them on in life. I wish that could be done for everyone who's been unemployed for some time, and I wish there was a way of doing that. So if there was a private member's bill to put the resources in to do that, that would be the one I'd put through.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.